In 2007, through a combination of tenacity, good timing and dumb luck, WhatCulture contributor George Rutherford landed a job which most could only dream about. After he had the nerve-wracking pleasure of being interviewed 4 times, he was ultimately hired by Vince McMahon to be a creative writer for the SmackDown brand of WWE. For those unfamiliar, the writing team at WWE is completely integrated into the production of television and pay-per-view events. George's on the road 300 days of the year, right alongside the talent. He was in the arenas, the plane and the hotels and saw the good, the bad and the sometimes very ugly. George admits his tenure wasn't very long as is typical of a creative team member, but that he nevertheless learned a ton about the inner workings of one of the craziest businesses in the world. Thankfully, he was willing to share some of that knowledge of his time spent as a fly on WWE's wall with us. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 9 things you learn as a WWE creative writer thanks to George Rutherford. Number 9, it's scripted, but not as much as you think. Everyone over the age of 10 knows that in professional wrestling, the match results are predetermined. Contrary to popular belief, the writers don't actually write the matches. That is done by producers or road agents who work with the talent to create the best match possible based on the storylines developed by the creative team. The best laid plans, however, often fall to ruin. Whether it's an unexpected injury, a delayed flight, personal issues, or just good old-fashioned backstage politics, the scripted plan sometimes has to be changed at the 0 hour. George recalls one instance where, due to a travel conflict, a match had to be completely changed, requiring a new script distributed to the talent and a new match devised with less than 90 minutes before going live on TV. He also notes it was the performer's utmost professionalism which makes such last-minute alterations actually go smoothly. Obviously not every match is a classic, but sometimes the wrestlers are asked to overcome some pretty serious hindrances to make it look natural. It's for this reason that many lower and mid-card talent travel with the TV crew, even if they aren't scheduled to appear, as you never know when you will get called in to potentially take over the main event. Number 8, Vince is very particular about his snacks. Before any TV or pay-per-view event, Vince and certain members of the production team meet early in the day to have what is called a production meeting. Makes sense. These meetings cover everything from script changes and talent issues to where to find worms for the boogeyman to eat in the ring. Got to come from somewhere. Rutherford attests that while it was very likely that 12 things would change by showtime, the production meeting was important in establishing a baseline for the day. He also remembers that one of the well-known rules of WWE production meetings was that there always has to be a Detour protein bar and a Diet Dr. Pepper at Vince's seat. Oftentimes, it would be the responsibility of a writer's assistants to procure these items and be sure they were in place before Vince's arrival. Apparently he didn't go crazy about it. The bar didn't have to be a specific flavour and the Diet Dr. Pepper didn't have to be exactly 47.2 degrees or anything. Comes a bit of a surprise, to be honest. But as George notes, Mr. McMahon is definitely one of those people who become so busy that he forgets to eat. When this happened, there would always be a spare Detour bar and Diet Dr. Pepper laying around that needed to be discarded after the meeting. Needless to say, George ended up consuming a few Detour bars and Dr. Peppers himself during that time. Number 7, Mark Henry has a great sense of humour. George told an entertaining story about a moment before a TV taping involving a certain super strong superstar. Sat ringside watching match rehearsals, reviewing the script and observing how the guys in the ring were executing that night's TV plan, his focus was suddenly snapped by a giant man paw clapping onto his shoulder. When he turned his head, he was staring in the intense face of Mark Henry. Mark gripped his shoulder and leaned in closer. Still not breaking eye contact, he growled, "Who are you?" Hi Mark, George answered. "I'm George. I'm the new writer for SmackDown." Leaning in even closer, Mark whispered, "Do you like men, George?" At this point, George's brain flipped through every possible response to this question until his better sense settled on, not in the romantic sense, Mark. Letting out a long exhale, Henry replied, "Oh, you will." Allowing a terribly awkward beat, he then stood up, his face pulling back into a perfectly pleasant smile as he said, "Oh man, I'm just f***ing with you. Welcome to the show." Mark was said to be an awesome guy to talk to who had a great sense of humour. And what else would you expect from the guy who convincingly pulled off sexual chocolate? Exactly. Number 6, John Cena is a true babyface. One doesn't have to look far to find an example of John Cena using his powers for good. Whether it's a Make-A-Wish visit or a simple autograph signing, Cena has truly established himself as the face of the WWE. If your skeptical side leads you to believe that it's all just good PR for the company, George has a little slice of life story that suggests otherwise. And I think we kind of knew this was true anyway. A native Pennsylvanian, the writer was thrilled when his father and sister were able to attend a show in State College. They were taking in the controlled chaos of backstage WWE before his sister timidly asked if she would be able to meet John Cena. Now remember, nobody is busier behind the scenes than Cena. There's a large premium put up on his time. George managed to find him backstage in an interview naturally, and as soon as there was a break, he asked if he could take a second to meet his family. CENA immediately stopped what he was doing and went to see them. John spent several minutes chatting with George's dad and sister. He didn't come off as rushed or inconvenienced and stayed longer than he needed, making them feel like the most important people in the arena. As far as George is concerned, John Cena is a true babyface. Number 5, you get pitched a ton of bad ideas. George recounts that as a creative team member, it's common for your phone to ring with pitches from wrestlers who either aren't on the main roster or are unhappy with their current character. In the interest of self-preservation, lower and mid-card talent will pitch a ton of ideas to the creative team in hopes of becoming the next breakout superstar. Some of these ideas are pretty good, others not so much. Keep in mind that during George's time, ideas that made the cut included Paul Burchill being a pirate and the somewhat racist Crime Time gimmick. So you can only imagine some of the pitched ideas which never made it further than a phone call. Like, say, Mark Henry rechristened as the Silverback, or Domino of Juice and Domino fame as a streetwise gangster rappy with a skinny white manager. It's kind of like from Happy Days to Boys in the Hood. Maybe this is why talent aren't allowed to improvise their characters. Number 4, nobody messes with The Undertaker. George tells us that behind the scenes, different superstars have various levels of sway. Curtain jerkers and mid-card talent are mostly at the mercy of the creative team when it comes to character and storyline development, whereas main eventers are obviously given more consideration. Not surprisingly, guys like Triple H and Shawn Michaels even used to participate in production meetings. According to Rutherford, however, nobody on the roster had more political clout than The Undertaker. When the dead man was involved in a storyline, he was always called and consulted with before any decisions were made. Not because he demanded it, but simply because he'd earned that level of credibility. It wasn't just with the creative team that Undertaker's word was law. The tales of Taker serving as an unofficial judge and jury when it came to backstage drama between talent are true. He would hear all sides of an argument and hand down his decision, which was always ultimately about the greater good, and everybody knew it. By all accounts, Undertaker is a fair and just field general who never abuses his position. He keeps the peace and expects a certain level of respect and professionalism from everyone around him. While Vince is always the true final word, Undertaker is the man in the locker room. Number 3, there's an awesome merch vault in Titan Tower. In WWE's Titan Towers in Stamford, Connecticut, there is a room. Available to employees only, this ordinary looking office space is in fact an awesome merch vault. During George's first week on the job, an HR guy took him for a tour of the building, during which he saw a fantastic gym, a top-notch cafeteria, and classic memorabilia, such as Andre the Giant's boot, on display on every floor. But the gem of this was undoubtedly said merch vault, containing rows and rows of every type of WWE memorabilia one can imagine. DVDs, posters, championship belts, shirts, action figures and giant foam hands lined the walls and shelves. As a child of the 80s, George was thrilled to see how much classic gear was there. The vintage rubber action figures, trading cards and old championship belt replicas took him right back to being 7 years old. And prepared to invoke your jealousy reflex, because he was even let loose on the treasure trove like a kid in a candy store and allowed to take anything he wanted with him. In the end, George fought his initial instinct to stuff his pockets and run out arms loaded, instead taking a few choice DVD sets before making a mental picture of the room and exiting with professionalism intact. Number 2, JBL wasn't easily impressed. JBL had a presence in the WWE locker room to say the least. A large man with a booming voice, when he walked into a room, everybody knew it. He also had no qualms about letting people know what he thought, and according to George, that included letting new writers know what he reckoned of their chances for success in the company. So when new creative members such as George met JBL for the first time, there was apparently a customary ritual involved. When George introduced himself to Mr. Layfield and shook his hand, JBL immediately gave him the nickname Head number 16 and took a picture with his phone. This name and picture were then put into his contacts along with the names and pictures of all the other dickheads, numbers 1 through 15. What a lovely man. Once George was officially part of the menagerie, JBL informed him and everyone that the over-under on the newcomer lasting in the company was 2 weeks. The writer wasn't sure if any real money was placed on these bets or if it was just amusing to him, but at that moment it became his goal in life to last at least 15 days. Determined to show JBL that he had the grit to make it in the dog-eat-dog world of sports entertainment, George tracked him down after the 2-week mark and informed him that he'd bested his 2-week prediction. JBL waited about a beat, said, "Good job, Head 16," and then he went on about his day. Number 1. Dusty Rhodes deserves his legendary status. During Rutherford's time with the WWE, Dusty Rhodes was the head writer of ECW. This gave him the chance to sit with him in the writer's room and pick his brain about all things wrestling. His decades of insight into programming, storybuilding, and the art of putting butts in seats was invaluable to someone as green as George. In the creative process, he never once saw Dusty push his own agenda or insert himself into the spotlight for no reason. He was, however, always willing to jump in and do what was needed for the good of the show. One day, our writer had the rare occasion to enjoy a lengthy one-on-one discussion with Dusty. When asked about the difference between the business in 2007 and the old days, Dusty stated, "Let me tell you something, young fella. The difference is that ever since Vince McMahon went on television and had to tell the world that wrestling was scripted, there was no going back after that." And no, I'm not doing a Dusty Rhodes impression. Essentially, Dusty explained that matches couldn't have long low periods like they did pre-Attitude Era. They needed more excitement, but still had to protect the talent from too much danger whilst focusing on better storylines to build drama. Always one to put the team first and take care of everyone. The American Dream was a real class act.
Well, would you look at that? You got all the way to the end of the video and your mother said you'd amount to nothing. What are the chances? While you're here, why not watch one of our other many possibly quite good channels, or watch another video which will be largely in the same vein as the quality content you've just endured. Go on then.